Hello everybody, this is John Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-Minute Histories videos. And today I'm in the Bolton Hill neighborhood at Park and Wilson, and I'm in the Strawbridge Methodist Church. I'm here at the invitation of Daniel Kamenetz. If you look behind me, I'm not sure you can tell, but it is no longer an active church. It's recently been converted into apartments and community space, and Daniel's with the development firm that did it, which has a wonderful name, Bolton Hill Belfry. So thank you, Daniel, for letting me come in here and film this video. Now, this is not the first church conversion in Baltimore. We've got churches converted into houses, including one around the corner on Bolton Street. We've got churches converted into offices. If you think the Mount Vernon Church in Hamden, that's a tech space now. We even have churches converted into breweries. Think of the glorious ministry of brewing, the former St. Michael's Church. But we're going to talk today about Strawbridge Church here, and we're going to start with some facts. Strawbridge is named after a gentleman, Robert Strawbridge, who many believe, particularly many in Maryland, believe was the first Methodist preacher in the United States. That is a little bit contended. We'll get to that in a second. But let's start with a word about Robert. Robert was born about 1730 in a town in Ireland called Drummer's Nave, now called Drumsna in County Leitrim. He converted to Methodism at a young age and was apparently quite good at being a preacher. A contemporary wrote, quote, "He was a man of more than ordinary usefulness and very ardent and evangelical in his spirit." About 1760, Robert and his wife did what many Irish did, and that is they left Ireland and came to America. Robert and Elizabeth came to a farm outside of New Windsor in today's Carroll County, Maryland. Back then it was part of Frederick County. And I say about 1760 because it seems a little odd for a literate preacher with a long career. He left virtually no written record, so we have to guess a little bit. But they moved to the farm, and Robert apparently liked preaching more than he liked farming. And pretty soon he set up a church in his home, which he called a class. Now that's a little bit of an unusual term, at least for me, and I don't know 100% where he got it, but we do know that John Wesley, the founder of Methodism back in England, set up a church in his own home that he called a class, so I think Strawbridge was taking it from there. Pretty soon Strawbridge set up a second class in a neighbor's home, and when those filled up, he would preach under an oak tree out in the open to a large crowd. Luckily for Robert, Elizabeth was a good farmer, so while she planted and hoed and reaped, he was out wandering much of the Middle Eastern United States, all the way over to the Eastern Shore, up to Trenton, New Jersey, down to Leesburg, Virginia, helping people set up Methodist churches. He even performed the first Methodist baptism in the United States. In a little bit of a funny twist of history, though, the first person converted to Methodism in the United States was a gentleman named John Evans. Evans was the Strawbridge's landlord. They rented their farm. And Evans was converted not by Robert, but by Elizabeth, most likely. Again, the records are a little fuzzy, but that's kind of a fun thing to speculate around. Regardless, Strawbridge, Robert, is the person that most credit as being the first Methodist preacher in America, except if you're from New York. If you're from New York, you look to a gentleman named Philip Embury. He, like Strawbridge, was from Ireland. He also converted to Methodism at an early age. He also emigrated to America in the 1760s, and he also set up a church in his house right about that same time. Since there are no definitive records, we may never know who was quote-unquote first, and in many ways it doesn't matter. Both men were seminal figures in early Methodism in the United States. But we're here in Baltimore, home to Lovely Lane United Methodist Church, the mothership of Methodism. And I just want to add that we believe Strawbridge got to New Windsor in the early 1760s, maybe 1760. And we know that Embury started preaching in the mid-1760s, maybe 1766. And it is hard to believe that Strawbridge just sat on his hands in the New World and didn't do any preaching for 5 or 6 years. So my bet's on Strawbridge. And if you don't believe me, go out to New Windsor to the Strawbridge Shrine and let those folks tell you all about it. All right, enough of Robert. Let's turn to this church. The church was founded in 1836, about 75 years after Robert started preaching, and it was founded as a Sunday school in the house of a gentleman named William Coulter in the 800 block of North Howard Street, right near Richmond Market, one of Baltimore's very earliest markets. By 1840, they had built a small wooden church on the other side of Howard Street, right across the street Street. And in 1843, they incorporated with a name, but it was not Strawbridge. Their name was Howard Street Station. And again, station is a little bit of an odd term, at least in today's ears. And I don't know 100% why they chose that term. Most often, a station church is associated with Catholicism. Think Stations of the Cross. And especially in Italy, there are station churches that are devoted to just one part of the liturgy. And people move from church to church, station to station, to do their prayers. So I think maybe it derives from the same roots as that. By 1860, however, they had moved again to what's now State Center, the area around State Center. The building sadly doesn't exist. And they had changed their name to honor Robert Strawbridge, the founder of Methodism, at least here in Maryland. Things were going on pretty well, and then John Goucher comes along, that lion in Methodist history. Think Lovely Lane, think Goucher College. He preaches at Strawbridge and then helps them raise money to buy the parcel that I'm in today and build the church that I'm in today as well. The year was 1881. When they moved in, there were a couple other churches already here in the new but growing Bolton Hill. There was an Episcopal church called Memorial Episcopal. There was a Presbyterian church called Brown Memorial. And a little later, there was a Catholic church called Corpus Christi. So they joined a bustling neighborhood. They pretty quickly built a parsonage next door, but then also after a few years moved the parsonage so they could turn that building into a guild hall where they would distribute clothes and food to those in need with an enormous effort after the great 1904 fire that there was sort of all hands on deck for the members of this congregation. The congregation worshipped here until about 2009 when they left, and the building sat empty. Neighbors here in Bolton Hill were worried about what would happen, but in 2014, Daniel and his folks came in and purchased the building and then worked with the neighborhood association to get it rezoned to allow for apartments and community space in this wonderful hall that I'm in now. Turning this church into apartments was not easy. It required a number of brain cells. The parsonage was pretty straightforward, but the church required trying to figure out how to make apartments that work for today's people out of things like the choir room and the social hall and the carriage house. But the development team did sharpen their pencils and got it done. And just a month or so ago, October 2024, they had a ribbon cutting on this place. So I'm going to wrap up and say thank you again to Daniel and invite you, if you're ever in Bolton Hill, come and check this place out. The 150-year-old, almost 200-year-old congregation, 150-year-old church that is now in its second life, named after Robert Strawbridge, who I again will say was the first Methodist preacher in the United States. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.